Our speaker is Ben Mahoney. Ben is the communications manager for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana Foundation. And in that role, he helps handle strategic communications, community support, and relationship building, as well as other noteworthy programs, such as a program to help conceptualize and coordinate an opioid abuse program. Ben is also a Gallup certified strengths coach, and I will let him talk to you more about the Gallup Strengths Finder program. But his topic today is entrepreneurial team building. When you are creating a company or working on an entrepreneurial project like you are for the YU Classic BizTech Challenge, it's important to realize what your assets are for each member of the team and how you can best use those to work together. Here at the Louisiana Technology Park, we work with a lot of entrepreneurial companies, and a lot of times we see that the founders are not communicating well with each other, and that can really inhibit their success. So Ben's going to talk to us a little bit more about that. Ben, are you ready to share your screen? Let me unmute you. Hold on. Okay, now, Ben, can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Okay.
Are you
And I clicked share the screen, so, oh, there we go. Can you see me?
Okay, yes, now I see your screen. Wonderful.
All right, thanks.
All right, well, you can go right ahead, and I will mute myself. And students, if you guys have questions, you are welcome to type them in the chat box. You'll see at the bottom of the screen is the chat box, and we can answer those if there's a pause in the program or at the end. All right, thanks, Ben.
All right. Thank you guys for joining. I'm super impressed. It's lunchtime. I'm hungry. I barely got here. Please ask questions as we go along, because usually I do this in a room full of people. So right now I'm in a very beautiful conference room, but I'm all alone, so it's kind of weird. So we're going to work between two decks today that I normally use as a Gallup coach. One that I developed for a Lano seminar I did a couple of months ago with folks who had been working in the nonprofit sector for about 15 years. And that's the one we're looking at now, and it's the secrets of powerful teams. And we're just going to move through a couple of slides of this really quickly to give you kind of a background for why we're using StrengthsFinder and how this can be useful to you. I don't know if you have what we call the Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, but here's a meme that shows up a lot, and I think if it's not now, by the time you're into your careers, you'll start to hear it, and it'll start to become a theme of conversation in your workplace. It's this thing that shows up where people talk about the differences between bosses versus leaders. And boss is always used as a really pejorative term, but to be a boss is terrible because it just means you're demanding and you're micromanaging and you're not supporting your people, you're not lifting them up. And to be a leader is a person who has vision and who is forward thinking and who brings people along and lifts people up. And this thing drives me nuts. I hate it, and I talk about it all the time. Because when we talk about who these leaders are, usually one of these three people shows up, right? Whenever a coworker or somebody who's posting this meme starts to complain about leaders versus bosses, we kind of tend to gravitate towards a handful of figures at best, right? And for those of you who don't know, that's Richard Branson from Virgin, that's Oprah Winfrey, and I can't remember if that's Bill Gates or Janet Reno. I think it's Bill Gates. Here's the problem. These people are rare, right? These people at this level of achievement are so rare so as to be statistically irrelevant. They represent such a small, tiny part of humanity, And yes, they're exceptional, and we should hold them up and we should look at them and they're worth examining. But to compare ourselves to these incredibly rare and very fortunate and lucky people, because anyone who has attained any degree of success will tell you that yes, preparation, yes, education, yes, working very, very hard will get you there, but also there is a degree of randomness and luck that propels you forward. So if we look at these people, it almost becomes irrelevant to the conversation as to how their success, how their patterns of achievement can influence the rest of us. These people are not actually super nice, it's worth saying. So this image that we have of them as being people-focused, people-driven, the kind of folks who lift others up, that's actually not the case, right? Because these people are brands. They're brands, and their brands are centered around people. But being a great leader, being this kind of great spearheading visionary actually takes a certain degree of self-possession and in some ways selfishness. And another question that's worth asking is, can you name one person that works for these people? Right? Usually not. Usually we see this person as the brand image that they are, but it's not very common that we know who their teams are. And why is that relevant? Because bosses don't matter, right? Teams matter. The person who's at the top, the person who's the face, the person who represents is actually not that influential in innovation. And in the BizTech Challenge, what we're talking about is innovation, right? We're talking about coming up and creating new ideas and new businesses and finding the path forward. So here's some stuff worth noting. Tiny Pulse is a research group, and they examined how influential bosses are in employee happiness, right? And what they found was employee happiness is more dependent on coworkers than direct managers. If you have a bad manager, if you have a tough boss, if you have somebody who isn't very good as or effective as what we think of as one of these visionary leader people, right? It's less influential on whether or not you like your job than how you get along with the people around you, how you get along with the teams that you work with. Towers Watson is another huge workplace research firm, and in 2012, and you can all read this, but once again, I'm in a room by myself, so I can't tell. Surveyed 32,000 employees across the globe and found that immediate supervisor relationship is ranked fourth as a predictor of engagement behind sharing vision, stress, workload, and goals. So the secret that we're trying to pull away from this for your teams, for your work life, is these people are great, right? These people are notable. These people are exceptional. But for most of us, it's teams. It's teams that matter, right? Not who is the leader. Let's talk specifically about innovation. The University of Amsterdam and the University of Maastricht did, excuse me, I was drinking some water. Over the years, there have been dozens and dozens and dozens of studies on what makes innovation work, but they're not connected to each other. So the University of Maastricht and the University of Amsterdam did a meta-analysis of 30 years of studies in team success and innovation. And they had to take these hundreds of studies, quantify the results in a way where they were sharing some common quotients, and then create a common vocabulary and then rank them to figure out what are the most influential factors in whether or not a team is successful, particularly in the realm of innovation. And these are the most important elements. Diversity and communication. So people with different points of view who are free to communicate without fear and reach out for expertise when needed. And a shorthand for that is vulnerability, right? Because that level of communication requires some kind of vulnerability, not having fear of being foolish or being seen as foolish, being comfortable enough with the people that you're working with to share ideas and to ask dumb questions, right? Diversity and communication. The second is vision. A unified understanding of what the team is working for and why. So sharing a common vision is one of the most influential factors in success and innovation. And in another way, that's also touching on vulnerability, right? A need to share with each other what it is we're dreaming about, what it is we're trying to get to. I'm sure, you know, you've met or worked with people who don't always share that, right? They hold their cards close to the vest. They don't always help the team understand what it is we're moving forward or what we're striving for. And again, this is a certain kind of vulnerability. Goal interdependence, which is I can't achieve my goals unless you achieve yours, right? Most businesses today are structured in a way where an employee has an annual review, they've got a list of goals, and that kind of happens in a silo. Your goals and the tasks that you're working on, they feed up to a team, but if your coworker completely blows it, right, if they just fall off the map and fail all year long, doesn't matter because you can still be successful. Conversely, goal interdependence says, I cannot be successful unless everyone on my team is successful. So this is a way of structuring your tasks and your goals in a way that everyone is depending on each other. Once again, vulnerability. And lastly is task orientation, so commitment to the highest quality in each task. And I know it seems like a stretch, and I know I keep saying the word vulnerability a lot, but this also touches on vulnerability because you have to imagine, and for any of you who are in the workplace now, or even if you're just working with teams of students, different projects, it takes a certain level of guts, of chutzpah to tell someone they're screwing up. And it also takes that same level of guts and chutzpah to accept someone else telling you that you're screwing up, right? So that's task orientation, commitment to the highest quality, which means we hold each other accountable. And that's another kind of vulnerability. What I want to tell you is that these can come from anywhere in your team. And that's why we talked about bosses versus leader at first, right? Because this kind of memified version of what it means to be a leader suggests that one person should be responsible for all these things, for communication, for vision, for creating a culture where there's task and goal interdependency. And we're just not built like that as human beings. One of the reasons I said these folks are not very nice, it's not that they're rude people, right? But if you are late for work, right? If you work for Oprah and you're late for work, something tells me she's not, unless you got a very good reason, you know, Oprah is not a person who's going to say, yeah, that's cool, don't worry about it. It's 11 o'clock, just go to your cubicle, don't worry about it. You know, these people, each one of them has a certain set of skills and talents that they are known for, that they lean into to make them successful. And it's not always communication. It's not always being known as a completely well-rounded person who's responsible for everything that happens in their brands and in their companies. Each one of them has a certain kind of profile. You know, Branson is an adventurous risk taker who's highly individualistic. Bill Gates is much more reserved, but he's a person who assimilates a lot of data. He's more analytical. Oprah is known more or less for being an incredible communicator and a people person, but also having a great deal of discipline and commitment, right? There are some overlaps, but each person, right, has a different distinct profile. And that's how it is in teams. That what's made each one of these people successful is that they realize that to build a successful team, to build a successful brand, you actually have to lean into the individual talents that each person has. So let's look at this other deck. And this is about finding your strengths, and this will touch more specifically on the Strengths Finder system. This is a quote from Gallup. It's one of these anonymous quotes. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Another way of saying this, and man, I never realized how much I reference Oprah until now. When you're in sync with who you're meant to be and how you're supposed to contribute to our magnificent earth, you feel a shift in perception. You start to notice that miracles show up regularly. You know, so often in life, as human beings, we kind of tend to have these thought patterns and say, man, if I can get that job, I'd be happy and things would be different. If I could be in a relationship, things would be different and I'd be happy. If I could have that car, if I could have that house, if I could move into this kind of role, then things would be right. We kind of endlessly imagine reconfiguring the variables in our life to a state of happiness. And that's not how it works, right? It never happens. You've got to figure out where you sit, what is the conduit for your energy, what strengths make you successful, and lean into those. And the secret is to finding and building teams, finding other people who complement what you have to offer to get you to that next level. But first, you've got to be in a space where you're understanding what your role is, who you're meant to be. StrengthsFinder was something created by Don Clifton. So Don Clifton is the guy who he bought and he runs Gallup. And if you watch the news at all, or if you listen to politics, if you follow politics, you usually hear Gallup referenced as a polling firm. So they're a very data-driven research firm that has created this workplace personal inventory system based on tons and tons of research about what makes people successful. And Gallup has created a system called Strengths that is based on 34 themes in 4 domains. So a unique combination, each person has a unique combination that is roughly at what we call a top 5, which is 5 strengths that really define them, right? That's who you are. It's the things you're best at. It's the lenses through which you see the world. So people who focus on their strengths, and again, this is from Gallup's work in large businesses like Accenture down to small consultancies and based on a ton of data, but people who focus on their strengths are 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life, or 6 times as likely to be engaged in their work. They do this stuff. They look forward to going to work. They have more positive than negative interactions with coworkers. They treat customers better. I can't read. Tell their friends they work for a great company. They achieve more on a daily basis. They have more positive, creative, innovative moments. Teams who work through strengths have almost 8% greater productivity and 9% greater profitability. What works about this system and what we hope to give to you in your teams is a common vocabulary, right? Using these strengths, and when you take the Strengths Quest assessment, if you're an incredibly strategic person, if you're an analytical person, these things will not be surprises to you, right? But you will have a common vocabulary for each other's, for yours and your teammates' greatest strengths and what's important to them, that in moments of disagreement or crisis, you can turn to. And it gives you a way to work stuff out. And that's what creates this productivity, this profitability. When you think of all the kind of gummy human drama that influences day-to-day work life, right? Because people are people, and people bring hopes and fears and baggage to work, and it influences how they interact with other people and what they think and how they perceive the actions of others. You know, a lot of times when somebody does something that makes us angry at work, we think, why is she doing that to me, right? That's our point of view. And point in fact, it usually has nothing to do with me, right? It's what it is they're trying to achieve, how they see the world, what their strengths say about what they value and what they think is important. I know you're not here in this room, so I'm imagining you all, but this is an exercise we do, and you can, just let's pretend. So raise your hand if you always talk to people in elevators, airplanes, grocery stores, wherever you go. Don't literally raise your hand if you're at home watching this by yourself. That'll be weird. Yeah, chances are you have a strength called WOO, which stands for winning others over. It's an influencing talent that these people never meet a stranger. When they walk into a room full of strangers, they want to meet every single one of them. They don't have a ton of incredibly deep relationships. They're not going to find the person they know best in the room. They're going to want to know as many people as possible. And you can usually spot them because they literally talk to someone wherever they go. What about making a list of things to do on the weekends? Chances are you've got a strength called achiever. Achiever is an executing talent, and we'll talk about the 4 domains of talents in a minute, but achiever is an executing talent that, these people are very driven, and they always, whether you have a written list or a mental list, you've got somewhere sitting with you a list of obligations that you have got to get to before you can let yourself just be. And for achievers, everything they do kind of fills up a little bucket of self-esteem for a moment with a little light, and then it goes out just as quickly. And so they're constantly driven. When you take
that was me. I have my little list on my phone.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
I've got number 4. If you all are, as you're taking this with your teams, if you've got achievers, one of the things you might notice, or if you've got one achiever on your team, because achievers are so driven, one of the things they're not great at is celebrating their own successes or the successes of others. So if you're not an achiever and you bring something to the table on your team, and your team lead or whatever doesn't seem very appreciative, right? That's one of those moments where you might say, why doesn't she want to recognize this awesome thing that I did, right? And that could lead to a moment of conflict. In fact, that has nothing to do with you, right? That's just this person who doesn't really take time to celebrate achievements because they've got a long list. They got a lot of stuff to get to. Raise your hand if you always have a highly organized or possibly color-coded closet. Chances are you've got another executing talent called discipline. Fun fact, you'll get a top 5 as part of this assessment. If you ever wanted to, you could get a full ranking of all 34 of the strengths. Discipline for me is number 34 out of 34, so this is not my strong suit. My closet is not color-coded. But yeah, people who have strong discipline talents are incredibly driven to create more time for productivity through organization. So, these are people who codify, code, sort as much as they can in their world so as to create more time for them to achieve, if that makes any sense. Raise your hand if you always think most rules are negotiable. Chances are you have a relationship building talent called individualization. Individualization is my number 3. These are people who respect and understand what is precious and unique about each and every person. They don't like anything that has to do with a sense of one size fits all. People who have strong senses of individualization like myself, we often prioritize our own autonomy, our own uniqueness over a lot of things. And this can often lead to a sense of, most rules are negotiable, right? Rules are for most people. But, so there's another talent out there called consistency. That's another executing theme. Consistency is completely the opposite. Consistency prizes fairness and treating everyone the exact same over anything else, right? So individualization and consistency can sometimes be 2 opposing forces in a team, where one person says each person should get what they need, right? And consistency, or that's individualization, and consistency says, no, everybody should get the same thing because that's fair, right? Raise your hand if you always push the elevator button to remind the elevator that you're there. Chances are you have an influencing talent called activator. Activator is my number 5. Activators are great at getting things started. They're not the most patient people. So if you have a team that has a lot of great strategic thinking capabilities and spends a lot of time meeting and debating the merits of different ideas, that one person whose foot is shaking under the table after about 20 minutes and who's like, look, let's just get started, that's your activator. That's your person who is great at motivating people to begin, to get started, to create inertia, because they understand that, once a plan is great, right? But once we're 10 feet down the road, the landscape might look completely different. So let's just get started. But activators tend to be very impatient. Let's talk briefly about talent versus strength. I kind of use them interchangeably, but within the StrengthsFinder system, they're worth distinguishing. Talent is a naturally recurring pattern of thought, feeling, or behavior that can be productively applied, right? So everyone has talent. When you take this assessment, these top 5 strengths that'll come back, these are talents, right? Versus strengths. When you become aware of what these qualities that are in you, what they are, and start to invest in them, start to explore them, and start to apply them consistently, they become strengths. So hopefully as part of this journey, not only do you get to know your talents and get to know the themes that make you you, but you decide which ones are worth investing in, and you move to a place of strength. Sometimes we distinguish these in terms of balconies and basements, which we'll talk about when we get to the 4 categories, the 4 domains of strength. Balcony versus basement is, how would I say this? One of the critiques of strengths-based coaching is that it ignores bad behavior, and that's not true. Actually, we focus on behavior, but we try to tie it or give it a common connection through strength to good behavior. So let me explain. Let's go back to activators, for example. Activator is my number 5. I'm an incredibly impatient person. If a meeting is not moving fast enough, if someone is taking a long time to express their thoughts, right? I tend to fill that silence. I tend to want to move forward because I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And that's basement behavior. That's bad behavior on my part that other people perceive as me being a steamroller, right? As me being arrogant, as me not valuing what it is they have to say. That's not the case at all. It's usually, well, sometimes it is. But usually, right, from the activator's point of view, it's that I assume that if you had something to say, you would have said it by now, right? Because we've been here 20 minutes. Balcony behavior, conversely, is great behavior that emanates from a strength, right? So things that are productive, that lift people up. So sometimes, knowing that I'm an activator, a team that is dealing with an incredibly complex project, that is looking for a way out of the planning stage, is looking for a way to get started while they can keep planning in the background or building a coalition, will call me in and say, how can we get started? And my natural talent for seeing the first few steps and wanting to take them as soon as possible can help teams get out of loggerheads, right? Let's look at another strength. So one that is called deliberative. People who are incredibly deliberative are very thoughtful and they're very risk averse. They tend to, you know what, I have a deliberative slide. I should show you that. I have slides for all this. We're not going to go through all these, I promise. Yeah, let's look at deliberative. People who are deliberative take a lot of care in the choices that they're making. They weigh risk very carefully. It takes them a long time to make a choice. If we look at the balconies of that, right, balcony behavior, which is that they're thoughtful, they're being conscientious, they're weighing all the risk before they make a decision. By the time deliberative gets around to a decision, so if you're a person who's often paralyzed and needs to process for a long time before you make a decision, chances are you have deliberative talents. And what that means is by the time you've made a decision, you're certain that it's absolutely the right thing to do. Basement behavior, right? Spends too long thinking. And sometimes because they're processing so much inside, they can seem non-communicative. And think about how that's perceived by others, right? The way that that's perceived is they don't want to talk about this. they're avoiding making this decision. They're avoiding me. They don't value my sense of urgency. So those are just a couple of examples, and we're not going to go through every strength today, although I'm happy to connect with anybody who takes the assessment, and we can go through it maybe on a team-by-team basis. But those are just a couple of examples that show you how perception, depending on whether it's your strengths or someone else, can shape completely a team's dynamic, and why it's important to create this common vocabulary to understand what it is we're all bringing to the table. Uh-oh. I don't have my 4 domains of thought. Hang on just a second. Boop, boop, boop. Maybe I can Google it. We're Googling together. Maybe this is a good time to take a question if there are any.
Yeah, I don't think I saw any in the chat box, but I'm enjoying
Oh,
the
here we go.
conversation.
Okay, here we go. This is good. It's perfect. Uh-oh. All right. So the last thing I will mention in our primer on strengths that will give you kind of a broad perspective on what it is we're doing are these, which are the 4 domains of talent. So in the Strengths Finder system, we've broken down these different talents broadly into 4 categories. They're permeable. It's not strictly in one category or the other, but by and large, if you have more executing talents, influencing talents, and relationship building or strategic thinking than the others, there are some commonalities that can help in guiding your teams. So for those of you who take this assessment and just want the briefest takeaway to help you navigate your team structure, here's where to look. So executing talents are purple talents on the left. These are people who know how to make things happen. So a great example is a colleague of mine who she's just one of those people that you can ask her to do something and she's going to do it. She's not going to forget about it. It's not going to fall off her list. She's got an incredible sense of responsibility, which as you see is on that list. And she's also got a ton of focus, which is another strength that drives people to move through tasks very quickly. Conversely, I've got a lot of relationship building skills. If you ask me to do something right away, because I'm an activator, I'll probably get to it. But chances are the longer it's on my list, the more likely it is to fall off. And that's the difference between somebody who's got strong executing talents versus strong relationship building talents. So if we were to generalize balcony and basement behavior for all of these executing themes, and again, they're subtle, they're distinct, achiever, ranger, belief, consistency, deliberative, etc. And they're worth reading the reports that you'll get about each one of them. But if we were to broadly summarize, balcony behavior for people who have strong executing talent is that they will get things done. No matter what it is you're asking them to do, they will handle it and you will know that it can be taken care of. Basement behavior is largely centered around prioritizing work over people. So people who have incredibly strong executing talent are probably those folks who will say, look, I'm just trying to get the job done, right? If they hurt somebody's feelings along that path, or if somebody walks away not feeling great about an interaction on the way to getting the work done, chances are that person has a lot of executing talent. The second category is influencing talents. Influencing talents are actually the rarest in an incidence chart. So command, which is there, which is actually the rarest talent, and self-assurance is the second rarest. But overall, influencing talents tend to show up less than the others. So people with dominant influence themes know how to take charge, speak up, and make sure the team is heard. These people they just have that little something that they know how to work a person. They know how to work a room. They're big presences. There's a range of strengths here from command, which is very pointed. We'll focus on it's exactly what it sounds like, telling you what to do, right? To, let's say, woo, which is incredibly charming, right? Not necessarily bossy, but incredibly charming. But by and large, these people are great at getting other people to do what it is they want them to do. So as you're planning your teams and you start to consider who's got what talent, in the pitch competition, the primary speaker, the primary presenter, if you've got somebody who's got some strong influencing talent, that might be a really great presenter on your team. Again, broadly summarizing, balcony behaviors for influencers, incredibly persuasive, know how to build consensus, are big presences. Presences? Is that even a word? I don't know. But broadly, basement behavior, sometimes don't take the work of others seriously. Sometimes being a big personality means you tend to overlook other people. And it can sometimes you can read as a phony or a shallow person. And again, that's basement behavior, broad assumptions. If you have these influencing talents, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. Relationship building. That's funny. I don't know if any of you read Hillary Clinton's book, but she has this great chapter about emotional labor. Everything we do as teams, as people who work together, requires some degree of emotional labor to make sure that the human glue, the human instruments that make up the team are well taken care of and are capable of working at their best. And that's really what this relationship building domain is about. These are people who prioritize humans, right? So these are folks who are great listeners, who usually are known for being very responsive to the needs of others, beyond what they need in terms of tasks done. Broadly summarizing, balcony behavior, great at building teams, great at making sure that people feel welcome and accepted, and that the emotional needs of the team are met. Basement behavior, broadly, sometimes prioritize that human stuff over getting the job done. So you can kind of see a dichotomy sometimes between executors and relationship builders. And in a team, and I've done this with a lot of teams now, some of the most basic and fundamental dysfunctions usually have to do with two people, one of whom is an incredibly strong executor and the other is an incredibly strong relationship builder, who just aren't recognizing each other's strengths. And so the executor says, this person, I do more work than this person. I get the job done. They don't take me seriously. And the relationship builder's point of view is, I am keeping the human beings in this team together. This executor is incredibly rude and dismissive of people, all for the sake of getting the job done. People are important. So you can see dichotomy where people are not talking, not appreciating each other's strengths. The last domain of talent is strategic thinking. So people who have strong strategic thinking teams are incredible visionaries. They bring a lot of new ideas to the table from a number of different perspectives. So for example, context, which you see there, is lessons learned from the past as opposed to futuristic, which are people who are inspired by visions of what the world could be and not at all concerned with the past. But broadly, people who are strong strategic thinkers are great at just processing kind of ethereal data ethereal imagination and data, and creating a vision or a structure or a plan. Basement or balcony behavior, incredible, if you give them a challenge, incredible at coming up with a roadmap or a vision of what could be. So when you're trying to come up with what your product or your service could be, strategic thinkers are, the people who are most likely going to enjoy that part, who are going to have a lot of ideas to bring to the table. Basement behavior, sometimes they love thinking so much that it's hard, they get caught up in that. And the idea is more precious to them than the work that needs to be done. So sometimes strategic thinkers can have a tough time transitioning into executing, right, to getting work done. The last thing I want to tell you before we open up for questions, and again, as you take these assessments, I'm happy to connect with anyone and talk about what comes back in terms of your profile and what that means for your team. These things are not labels, right? They're not. One of the things that always terrifies me is somebody takes a StrengthsFinder assessment at work, and it turns out they are relationship building and strategic thinking focused, and they go to their boss and say, well, you can't ask me to file papers anymore because I don't have any executing talents and I'm not good at that. That's not how this works, right? The idea is you can do any job, you can do any task, but how will you approach it, right? So if we were to take something as mundane as filing papers, an executing person is, and again, I'm generalizing with broad abandon, an executing person is going to get started. And they're going to be in that drawer and they're going to be filing all day long and they're going to do it until the job is done, right? An influencer is more likely to find somebody else to do it, to influence one or more people to help. A relationship builder is going to be great at understanding why this needs to be done, what it means for other people, and they'll be motivated to do it by the notion that they're helping someone, right? And a strategic thinker will probably come up with some whole new system of organizing the paper that has ever been thought of, and that's going to be their approach. So I know that's a broad strokes, but you can do any task, and on your teams, it's not fair to say that just because somebody has primarily executing talents, they've got to do all the work, and then the influencer will just kick in whenever we're presenting at the pitch challenge. You can do any task. The question is, how do you approach it? And that's what these profiles, that's what strengths will mean for you. And I've been talking now for 45 minutes. That feels super weird. I don't know if we have any questions, but in terms of an introduction, I think that's all I would want to say to you.
Yeah, no, Ben, this was awesome. It's been several years since I took the StrengthsFinder assessment, so this was a good refresher. It makes me want to go back and find my profile again and look at it
I can send you a code. You can take it again. I can send you a code.
Yeah, I can take it again. Yeah, and I wanted to mention to the people on the call who may be wondering, as part of the BizTech Challenge, we are offering a complimentary, meaning that we are paying for it, assessment through the Strengths Quest program. If you would like to participate in that, you need to email me at gen@nexus-la.org. And if you can't remember that, you can find my email address on the BizTech Challenge website, biztechchallenge.com. And if you email me and say, hey, I loved the presentation, I want to participate and do a StrengthsFinder assessment on myself or my team, I will email you with a code that you can use to do that. I recommend that your team go ahead and do this. It's a very interesting exercise, and it'll help you when you're trying to determine, who should do what on the team, especially when you're building your pitch and trying to decide who should be the presenter. You probably want that influencing person to be your presenter for the pitch. So that person can really connect with the audience the best. I have a question here in the chat box that says, if you could wrap everything up into one paragraph, what would you have us leave with?
Oh, that's not what I'm good at. If I could wrap everything up into one paragraph. Okay. People need people. So one of the ways that we tend to kind of approach development for people is we'll take you into a room once a year at work. We'll take you into a room once a year and we'll say, Genevieve, you are great at this, this, and this. You knocked it out of the park. Here's the things that you're not so good at. And you really need to put time and energy into making those parts of yourself better, right? Now, listen, there's some bad behaviors that need to be corrected, but if you are not, if what the feedback you get is you've got to figure out how to become a better presenter, a better influencer. Essentially, the science says that energy is wasted, right? You can get better at things, but you should really lean into your natural talents. Chances are there's someone on your team who has those gifts. And the solution is not for you to become this kind of ubermensch, well-rounded omni person. Find someone who has those talents and connect with them. And if you are, harkening back to all the mean things I said about Oprah and Richard Branson, the reason these people are successful, yes, they're talented, but they know what their gifts are, and they have built organizations and teams that complement their strengths. So become aware of the strengths of the people around you and lean into those. Build partnerships. That's the ultimate solution to success. That was more than a paragraph, but it's what I got.
No, I thought that was good. And, I liked what you said about, trying to get better at the things that you're not better at. My strength is obviously executing. I'm the achiever. I'm the disciplined person, the responsibility person. I have a little bit of the strategic thinking as well, but I'm not the relationship person. I'm not the communicator. So I recently joined Toastmasters, which is a public speaking club, because it has allowed me to learn how to better communicate with people and to get my point across. Now, if it's between me and a colleague who's better at giving a presentation, I'm going to go ahead and let them give it.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, but there are instances where I need to be that person. There's no choice. So
right.
I need to get better at that. And then I'll speak to the strengths in terms of entrepreneurial team building. Like I said, I've been at the tech park here for almost 10 years. I've worked with a lot of different startup companies. And I will say, I'm not going to say a number, but I would say definitely the majority of the time, a co-founder relationship does not work out. And I'm
right.
not trying to dissuade people from having a co-founder, because sometimes it does work out and those people are able to work together well. But if you're going to do that, you have to realize what each other's strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and be able to communicate properly. Because if you have that executing person working with that influencing person, there's going to be clashes, and you need to realize how you can better communicate with each other. Because I've seen companies that have totally fallen apart because of this. And so,
and if you think about just generally, what I would imagine happens most often is you've got one strategic thinking person, right, who's usually the product owner or the person who's kind of the visionary behind the idea. And usually they bring on kind of what we think of a COO, right? Somebody who has incredibly strong executing talent, who can keep them on task and handle the kind of business side of what needs to be done. And if those people don't appreciate that about each other, and more importantly, when the stuff hits the fan, if they're not owning their kind of basement behavior, right, and understanding when I'm at my worst, this is what it looks like. I can totally see that, yeah, those kinds of relationships will completely fall apart.
Yeah, and another note on that is if you are going to start a company, many of you are creating ideas for the BizTech Challenge that could be very commercializable. You may want to start a company. It's very important that if you're going to share in the equity of the company and the ownership of the company, that you hire an attorney up front to help draft legal documents that outlines what will happen if all of a sudden me and my partner just absolutely cannot agree and get along anymore. And you need to have some sort of clause in there that says that one can buy out the other, or what will be the split of the ownership or the property that's in the company if the company falls apart. So all of that needs to be outlined up front. If you're in the Baton Rouge area, Southern University has a new law clinic that gives free assistance to entrepreneurs that are trying to start businesses. So they give free legal help. There are other similar of these law clinics at other universities around the country. So something to look for if you need some legal assistance with starting your business.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? I don't see any more in the chat box. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone who joined the call. We will have the recording. The recording says it's recording, so I'm hoping that it works properly and we can post the link. We've been posting the links to all the webinar recordings on the biztechchallenge.com website under webinars. Our next webinar is going to be next Tuesday. We'll actually have two back-to-back. Joelle Dawson had done a webinar for us a few weeks ago about the customer discovery process, and that one did not record correctly. And I know we've had a bunch of teams join since then, so we're going to repeat that webinar, and then he will immediately go into his next webinar, which will be about building the pitch. So if some of you are already starting to work on your presentations, you definitely will want to tune in next Tuesday for those. And that will start at 4:30 and go to 6:30 Central Time. All right, well, thanks again, Ben. This has been great. And again, if you and your team would like to take the assessment, send me an email. And please, if you ask for a code, please make sure you're going to use it, because as I said, we are paying for these. And I would hate to pay for codes that do not get used and are wasted. All right.
And I would just want to reiterate my offer that if a team takes the assessment together, I'm happy to spend half an hour on the phone with you, going through the results together and learning about each other.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Ben.
No problem.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording now. A couple people
have
said
stop sharing.
Thanks, and we'll wrap it up. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.